Imagine your ideal week of working out. Would it involve more time spent training or less? Would you squeeze in an extra session at the gym? Or would you do less than you're currently doing, but at a higher quality or intensity? Now think critically. What would it take to turn that dream into a reality? More is not always better. For money, you might always want more. For time with friends and family, sure. For chocolate? Well, no, probably there's a sweet spot. With fitness training variables, the trend these days seems to be towards adding more and more specialized exercises across more and more sessions, but let me explain why with some variables, more is not necessarily better. Depending on your goals, you just might benefit from limiting the amount of time you spend in the gym and maximizing recovery. Be sure to stick around to the end of this video where I outline my 2 favorite methods of applying progressive overload to any style of training plan. That'll leave you with action items to apply to your training this very week. First of all, if you aren't familiar with progressive overload, this video covers what it is and why it's paramount to physical training. Watch that one when you're done with this if you want to learn more. Here's a very abridged version. Progressive overload is the need to consistently increase the level of stimulus to the body and the demands placed on it to drive physical adaptations of strength and size of the muscles and connective tissues. Without consistently and progressively overloading the stimulus, the body has no need to continue adapting and progress stops. So let's get into the 2 training variables which I do not think are good candidates for applying progressive overload, but are commonly taught as such. I realize this is a bit of a hot take, but it is what I found to be true in my training. This is because I think there's a difference between progressive overload variables and what I'd call instead ramp-up variables. So these are things which you may start low and then slowly bring them up over time, but after a certain point, increasing them further doesn't really make sense as a goal in itself. The first is frequency. Up to a point, doing workouts more frequently will increase your rate of progress. But do you really want to train twice a day, 7 days a week? Where does it stop? I think most people want to train in order to improve their health and energy levels, to live the rest of their life better, and not to replace the rest of life. So training just a few times a week is probably the max you'd want to do. Likewise, we have volume. While most would say that volume is the king for hypertrophy, much like frequency, it's not something you can just increase forever. Increasing volume means making your workouts longer and longer, which necessarily comes at the expense of higher intensity, or adding more sessions, which again has the same drawback as frequency. I think for most people, just a few sets of each exercise a few times a week is enough. Maximum recoverable volume is a thing. Beyond a certain point, it doesn't make any sense to try to increase it. In fact, doing so will actually slow down your progress instead of speed it up. Whereas you wouldn't say that about intensity. You wouldn't say, oh, now I've worked up to a 100 kilogram squat, I'll just stick with this forever. No, you'd want to continue trying to increase it as much as you can forever. And that is because intensity is the king variable for progressive overload for strength training. We manipulate other variables merely to allow progressive overload of intensity. Of course, if your goals are not for strength, but more towards muscular endurance, in that case, adding more volume at lower intensities does make sense. But that's a topic for another video. As always, these are just my opinions based on my years of training. Your ideal volume might be higher or lower than mine. The purpose of all videos on this channel is to share my knowledge and ideas, which you can test out for yourself, keeping what works and discarding the rest. So how do we actually implement this principle into a program? Here are my 2 favorite ways. The first is double dynamic progression. This is probably the best system for most trainees, and it's the one I've used the most in my career. This involves setting a dynamic rep range and increasing the intensity when you can and increasing the reps when you can't. So as an example, let's say we're doing a bicep curl and we've chosen a target rep range of 5 to 8 repetitions. For the first session, because we don't know our actual strength, we're just guessing at the weight. So we start with 10 kilograms and it turns out we hit 8 repetitions, leaving 1 to 2 repetitions in reserve. So for the next session, because we hit the top of the rep range, we will add 1 kilogram to the dumbbell. In the second session, with 11 kilograms, we lift 7. In this case, because we got 7 reps, but probably had 2 reps in reserve, I'm going to increase the weight anyways, and for the third session, we'll try for 12 kilograms, and maybe this time we only get 6. Because that's toward the bottom of our rep range, we'll keep the weight the same next time and try to really max out the rep range. In the fourth session, if we hit 8, then the next session I would progress to 13. Doing so is a big jump, and maybe we only get 5. Then you continue like this until the end of your training cycle, take some time off, maybe switch exercises, and start over again, but at a higher weight. The second method of using progressive overload kind of flips the notion on its head a little bit, and this is with training to absolute failure. When training this way, the idea is to really focus on putting 100% effort into every single set. Thus, you choose a target rep range, let's say from 6 to 10 repetitions, and the goal is to just lift weights until failure each session. That way, each time you're always going to try as hard as you possibly can, but then as a result of the adaptations that are made after the session, the weight naturally goes up. You have to keep increasing the weight in order to make yourself fail within that range. So as an example here, let's say we're trying the bicep curl. We start with 10 kilograms, but pushing it to absolute failure, we're able to eke out 14 repetitions. Because that's way above our rep range, we're gonna add 2 kilograms to the bar. And then the next session, we get 11 repetitions. That's still above our rep range, so we're gonna add 2 more kilograms. And then the next time, we fail at 7 repetitions. Now we're near the bottom of our rep range, so we're gonna keep that intensity trying to push to the top. The next session, maybe we were able to add 2 repetitions to a total of 9. And then the final session, we blast through the top of the rep range, hitting 11. So the next session, I'd add more weight. Notice in this example, the intensity increased much more quickly, which I think is standard when you're actually pushing to absolute failure and not leaving reps in reserve. The con is that it's very mentally difficult to train this way and you risk injury. So I'd reserve this type of training for more advanced trainees. And if you're doing this, you really need to focus on technique and recovery. This means taking several days off between sessions and probably only doing 1 or 2 sets to absolute failure like this. This is the way I've been training for the last 3 months, and I've seen really good results with it. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Have an excellent week of training, and I'll see you in the next video.